Hello everyone, welcome to the course of Programming Fundamentals with Python. This is week number 7 of our course, and in today's lecture we will be talking about loops. Here is a roadmap for today's class. We will start with objectives, defining the objectives for this lecture. And then I will give you an introduction to the repetition structure, what it is, how it works. After that, we will discuss the two most important loops that are used in the Python programming language, and they are while loop and for loop. And finally, we will end this lecture with some recommendations for the naming of variables that are used inside the loops. Here are the objectives. At the end of this week, the student will be able to learn about two types of loops. One loop is called the while loop, the second one is called the for loop. While loop is also known as condition controlled loop, and the for loop is known as count control loops. You will also be able to learn programs that will demonstrate the concept of these loops. Okay, what is a repetition structure? A repetition structure actually causes a statement or a set of statements to be executed repeatedly. In order to understand better the concept of repetition structure, I have mentioned an example here, and the example is about printing the table of 5, the multiplication table of 5. There is 5 ones are 5, 5 twos are 10, 5 threes are 15, and so on up to 10. Okay, suppose you want to write a program for this multiplication table without using loop. We do not know what loop is, so we have to write a program which will use the print function 10 times. Like, for example, in the first line you can see that 5 multiplied by 1 equal. This is actually an example of string. This will be displayed as it is, as it looks here. After that, it will display the result of 5 multiplied by 1. This is multiplication operator, we know it very well. So 5 multiplied by 1 is 5. So it will display 5x1 equal 5. Then it is an example of sequential execution or sequential flow. So it will come to the second line and it will print 5x2 equal, and now the result of 5 multiplied by 2, which is equal to 10, then 15, 20, and so on. So this is a program which will display the table of 5 without using any loop. Now suppose for a moment that you know the concept of loop. So if you write the same program, if you want to solve the same problem, but by using loop, then the program is going to be like this. For I in range 1 to 10, print 5 into I equal to 5 multiplied by I. Forget about the syntax, forget about what's happening here. Just concentrate that how we actually solve the same problem in an efficient way. That is, we have to write the print statement only once. So compare the two programs now. They are actually doing the same things. But one, we do not use any loop. We do not use any repetition structure. While in the second, we are actually solving the same problem with the help of for loop, which is an example of repetition structure. So the loops actually make our program more efficient in terms of memory, in terms of writing the statements, in terms of execution, in terms of readability, and so on. And you can see that it will print this statement multiple times. How much time? Here it is mentioned that we want to print it 10 times. So this is an example of a repetition structure. Now, what is a repetition structure? It is actually a structure that will cause a statement or a group of statements to be executed again and again. If you remember, we have three types of structures. The first one is sequential. The second one is decision control structure, and the third one is repetition structure. So here in repetition structure, the execution of the statement or group of statement will occur again and again as long as the condition inside the loop is true. Okay, so loops are actually structures that control the execution of a statement or a block of statement. Instead of writing the same sequence of statement over and over again and again, a better way to repeatedly perform an operation is to write the code for the operation only once, as we did here. Then place that code in the structure of the loop. For example, we have placed this statement inside the loop body. So this will cause the computer to repeat it as many times as necessary, in this case 10. Okay, so this can be done with a repetition structure, and which is more commonly known as loops in programming languages. In Python, two broad categories of loops are commonly used. The first category is called the condition control. The second one is called the count control loop. What is the difference? In condition control loop, we have to check a condition. If the condition is true, then the body of the loop will be executed. And if the condition is false, the body of the loop or the statement inside the loop body will not be executed. So in condition control loop, actually the condition control the number of times it will repeat the execution of the statement. While on the other hand, the count control loop repeats a statement, the execution of a statement or group of statement for a specific number of times. While loop is an example of conditional control loop, while the for loop is an example of count control loop. Now let us explore these loops one by one. First, let us study the while loop. As I just mentioned, the while loop is an example of condition control loop. It actually causes a statement or set of statement to be repeated as long as the condition is true. The while loop actually exists in almost all programming languages, whether it is C language, C++, C#, Java, VB, .NET, etc. All languages have support for while loop. And it is used to iterate or repeat one or more code statement as long as the test condition, which is also known as expression, is true. So if you want to write condition control based program, then you have to use the while loop. While loop is, as you can see the name, from the name, that it will actually work while the condition is true or as long as the condition is true. So the while loop, as we will see in a moment from its syntax, it actually has two parts. Part number one is related with a condition check. The condition will be checked. If it is true, then the body of the loop will be executed. In part number two, that is the body of the loop, it actually has a statement or a block of statement that is repeated as long as the condition given in part one is true. So it has two parts. In part one, the part one deals with the condition check. Part two actually deals with the statement that appears in the body of the for loop. The while loop is also known as a pre-test loop. Why it is called a pre-test loop? Because it tests the condition before performing an iteration. First, the condition will be checked, will be evaluated. If it is true, then the execution will occur. The behavior of the while loop can also be represented with the help of this flow chart. You are also familiar with the flow chart if you remember the last week lecture about if else if statement, nested if statement. Then there we discussed about the flow chart. let us revise the concept. We have different symbols. For example, the condition is checked with the help of a diamond symbol. The lines representing the flow and the process or the statements are actually represented with the help of these squares. And also we have starting and ending of the program. Program start here, it ends here. Or you can say the begin or stop conditions. So first we have to check the condition. If the condition is true, then the process will be executed, or the statement will be executed, or the group of statements will be executed. And if the condition is false, this statement, which is part number 2 inside the body of the for loop, inside the body of the while loop, will not be executed. Where is the loop? Here. The arrow, the line with the big arrow actually represent the concept of the loop. This statement will be executed once if the condition is true, and then after execution of this statement, the control will be transferred to the condition. We will check the condition again. Now, if the condition is true again, then this process will happen. The execution will happen. The statement will be executed. And then after executing it for the second time, we have to return to the condition check the condition again for the third time, repeat this statement, execute this statement as long as the condition is true. Once the condition becomes false, you have to go to the next statement if it is there, or you have to terminate the program if it has no other statement. So in the flow chart, you can always recognize a loop like this with the help of different symbols. And it is important to draw a line that will actually go back to the condition check when you are using the flow chart for representation of the loop. Now the syntax of the for loop, of the while loop. The while loop, as I mentioned, has two parts, part 1, part 2. Part 1 is actually the condition check. Part 2 is actually the statement or set of statements that we want to execute again and again as long as the condition is true. So in the first line, you have to start the loop with the keyword while. So you can see it is actually a keyword and then followed by a Boolean expression. It is actually the condition that we have to check, right? So if the condition is true, then the statement will be executed. If it is false, then this statement will not be executed. And then it is followed by a colon. In the second part of the loop, you have to mention a single statement or a group of statements. Along with indentation, you have to give some free space, white spaces here with the help of a space bar or with the help of a tab, and then which is followed by the statement. So the while loop will always start with the while keyword and it will always end with a colon. With the while statement, the first thing that happen is the Boolean expression. It is evaluated before the statement in the while loop block is executed. So if this Boolean expression evaluated to true, then the while loop block is executed. And after each iteration of the loop block, the Boolean expression is again checked. Now, if it is true, the loop is iterated again. While the test condition is true, then the statement or block of statement in the while loop will be executed. Each repetition of the loop is known as iteration. Okay, and as you noted, the test is actually performed before each iteration, including the first iteration itself. Therefore, if the condition fails the first time around the loop, the statement or block of statement may never be executed at all. So if the condition is false in the first iteration, the statement will not be executed at all. Some examples about the while loop. Okay guys, let me tell you one thing. I will not going to practice on these examples in the theory class, but I will record a lecture about the practical sessions of week 7 in which we will perform the practical session in which we will execute all these examples plus other examples which will reflect the while loop and the for loop, but I will try to explain them here. In this example, I want to print a statement that is print me 10 times. How much time? 10 times with the help of a while loop. So first I need to write the while statement, the first part of the loop, and then the condition. Remember, I told you earlier that the use of parentheses is not compulsory, but I love them, so I use them. It makes me more comfortable to work with the loops and the if-else statements. First, we have to check the condition. If this condition is true, then this statement will be executed. And it is followed by a colon, as you can see here. So while is the keyword, condition, and colon, and a set of statements. Okay, you can see from the indentation that this statement is actually part of the while loop. This statement is actually part of the while loop, but this statement is not part of the while loop. This is actually another program statement which will be executed after the completion of the while loop. So this statement will be executed 10 times, but this statement will be executed only once because it is not part of the while loop body. Okay, so count is a variable. You can use any other variable here. To start the execution of the loop or the first iteration of the loop, we need an initial value from where the count will start. So you can see that the initial value of this variable is 0. So first it will take the value 0 and then it will make the comparison. 0 is less than 10. Yes, it is less than 10. The condition is true. Come to the body of the loop and execute this statement. So this statement will be printed on the screen for the first time. And then we need a way to increment the value of this count variable from 0. So the simplest way is to add 1 to it. And this is the compound operator, compound assignment operator. Hey, take the previous value of count, which is 0, add 1 with it, and then store the result back in this variable. So the previous value was 0 and the new value is going to be 1 now. Go back, compare it again, check the condition. Now the new value of count is 1. 1 is less than 10. Yes, it is less than 10. Again, print this statement for the second time and increment the previous value of count. Now the previous value of count was 1. Add 1 to 1, you will get 2. It is loop. Go back to the condition check. Now the new value of count is 2. 2 is less than 10. Yes, condition is true. Print this statement for the third time. And this loop will occur again and again until the condition is true. Once the value of count reach to 10, we will check the condition. 10 is less than 10. No, now the condition is false. Once the condition becomes false, this statement will not be executed. This statement will not be executed. We have to move to the next statement. There is print done. So the done will be printed. Okay, one important thing. While you are working with the loops, you have to be careful. Sometimes you make mistakes and the loop will execute forever, which is called infinite loop. And then you need a mechanism to stop the execution of the program. You can interrupt it with the specific keys on the keyboard. For example, if you remove this statement count is equal to count plus 1, this incrementation statement, then and run this program, then you will see that this program will execute it forever. Why? Let us see. The value is 0. Condition is checked. 0 is less than 10. Yes, condition is true. This statement will be executed and we don't have this statement. Now it is a loop. We have to go back, check the condition. Now we do not increment the value of count. So the value of count is same, that is 0. Again 0 will be checked with or compared with 10. 0 is less than 10. Yes, condition is true again. This statement will be executed for the second time. And then again and again, forever 0 is going to be less than 10 and forever this statement is going to be executed. So you have to be careful while working with the loop, especially with the loop variables, to avoid the infinite loop. Second example. I want to display, instead of displaying a message, I want to display the first 10 number starting from 0. That is 0 up to 9. For that, you have to use the same concept. Here I use the variable I instead of the variable count. So it is the same thing. You can use variable of your choice. Why I am using I will explain it at the end of this lecture. So here the variable initial value is 0. Check the condition. 0 is less than 10, yes, condition is true. Then you have to execute this statement. What's happening here? F is format. F stands for format. I want to display this string. Hey, print me 10 times. And I also want to display the value of variable I. Actually, I'm interested in printing the first 10 numbers. For that, I'm using a variable. So the initial value is 0. Current value of I is I inside the curly brackets. It will actually give you the current value of I. So the current value of I is 0. So it will print 0 on the screen. Okay, in order to concatenate, in order to use string as well as integer in the same line, you have to use the format. And for the format, the character is F. It will actually allow to print this value. If you do not use this F character, the output, maybe you will get the output, but not the value of the I. And then as we saw in the previous example, you have to increment the value of the variable by 1. It is the same thing. Here I have used I is equal to I plus 1. And in the previous, we saw count plus equal 1. So this is actually a compound assignment operator. You can write it this way or by using this way. Here you have to write the variable for the second time, while here you have to write the variable only once. So that is up to you. There is another way to increment the variable, but I will not go into the detail. That is I is equal to you can simply write I plus plus here as well. We will see the details in coming lectures. And then print turn. Once the condition in the loop is false, then we have to move to the next statement and it will print turn. So the execution is like this. Check the condition for the first time. 0 is less than 10, yes. Execute this statement. In this statement, this is a string literal. It will be displayed as it is, but inside the string literal, we want to display the value of I as well. So the initial value of I is 0. 0 will be displayed. Increment the value of I by 1. The previous value was 0. The new value is 1. Check the condition again. 1 is less than 10. Yes. Execute it for the second time. Print me 10 times current value of I. Now the current value of I is 1. So 1 will be displayed. Next time the value will be 2. 2 will be displayed. Then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, then 8, then 9. Remember 10 will never be displayed because you can see the condition that is less. If you put equal sign here, less than or equal, then 10 will also be displayed. Example number 3 about the while loop. In this example, I want to find the average of natural numbers. How many natural numbers? The first n natural number. N is a number which will be provided by the user. So I am using a variable with the name number. I am assigning a value to this variable. Sorry, it is integer, not float. Make the correction. And then I want the user to input a value. For example, the user has entered 4 from here. The 4 will be assigned to this number. Now to find average, as you know, we need two things. There is sum of the variable on the total number of values. So the initial value of sum is 0. And then to find the average, I need to add all the values. For example, in this case, the n is 4. So I have to add 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 and plus 4. And then I have to divide it by the total number of values, which in this case is 4. And the 4 is stored in the variable number. So sum will be divided by 4. And the resultant value will be assigned to the variable average. And then I want to display the value which is stored in this average with the help of print statement. So it will display the current value of the average variable. So this is a program by using the while loop, you can actually find the average value of n number, which is a variable entered by the user. We will discuss more about this program in the practical session. Okay guys, the second type of loop is called for loop. In Python, you use the for statement to write a count controlled loop. Remember, we have two types of loop. The first type is the decision control type loop, which is the while loop, while the second is the count control loop. So for is actually an example of the count control loop. This is commonly used loop. In any programming language, you will find the for loop. Its syntax is more clear than the while loop. Its use is more common as compared to the while loop. And a count control loop, it actually iterates a statement or a group of statements for a specific number of times. So count control loops will actually execute a statement or the group of statements inside the body of the loops for a fixed number of time. In many cases, we actually want, or we actually know in advance how many times we want to iterate over one or more than one statements. So although the while loop can be used for such situation as well, the for loop is far more concise and more clearer as compared to the while loop. So remember, in most of the cases, in most of the scenarios, for most of the problems, you will have both the options available. You can either use the while loop or the for loop for solving the same problem, but that is up to you whether you want to use the for loop or the while loop. But most of the programmer, they prefer to use the for loop as compared to the while loop. Actually, the for loop, it is more clearer to programmers than any other loop. The behavior of the for loop can be seen with the help of a flowchart. Again, we have a statement here, a condition, but here the condition is not like true false. It is actually a variable which has a final value. For example, the final value is 5 and the initial value is 1. So you have to check whether 1 is less than the final value, that is 5. If the condition is true, means we do not reach to the final value, then you have to process the statement inside the body of the loop. If this condition is true, then execute this statement. Do not confuse the no and yes here. No means okay, the last item, is the last item reached? No, means we still have more iterations. So iterate this, and then this line with the big arrow actually represent a loop. Hey, after execution of this statement, do not go to the next statement. Do not terminate the program. Go back and check the value again. Do we reach the last value, the last item? No. Okay, execute it again. Go back, check again, and so on. This loop will be executed for a fixed number of times specified here in the variable. Once the value become larger than the last item, or once the last item is reached, yes, then you have to go outside the loop. If there are statements outside the for loop, those statements will be executed. If there is no statement, the program will be terminated. Let us see the syntax for the for loop. Like the while loop, the for loop will be started with the for keyword. So this is the keyword, and then you have to check the iteration variable value. Similarly, you have to use a keyword that is in. So here is the difference. In the while loop, we do not have the in variable, the in keyword, while in the for loop, you have two keywords in the first line. You see the for keyword itself, then a variable, and then the in, which is the keyword, and then a sequence. We will see about it. The syntax will become more clearer when we see the examples. This is followed by the colon. And in the second line, the second part of the for loop is given, which is a statement or a group of statements, along with indentation to make them part of the for loop body. Another way to look at the syntax is here. For is a keyword, a variable, in is a keyword, and a range. This range word is optional. If you write it, that's okay. If you omit it, that's fine. And here you have to write 3 numbers. We are going to see them in a moment. So the for loop start with the keyword for, ends with a colon, and we also have a keyword in. The first item in the sequence gets assigned to the iteration variable. Here the iteration variable can be any valid variable name. It's up to you. You can select the name. Then the statement block is executed. If it is a single statement or a group of statements, they will be executed. Let us see the first example to make things more clearer. So this is a statement which is not part of the for loop, so it will be executed and printed in the same way. This is a string, print out values in a range. So here is the main thing. For keyword, I, name of the variable, in, again keyword, range is optional. You can omit it. or you can write it. This is important to understand. We have three numbers, 0, 10 and 1. The first number actually represents the starting value. Let us go back to the while loop. You see, we need a starting value. But in the case of while loop, you have to mention it before the while loop. In case of for loop, you have to mention this starting value inside the range. That is why we I told you sorry, that for loop is more concise, more clear. You see, everything is in the one line. This is the initial value, the starting value for the variable. So the initial value of I is 0. And this is the final value, the last value, the stop value, that is 10. And this is the step value. Step value mean how much, which value you want to add with the initial value. Let us go back here. In the while loop, you see, every time we have to increment this variable by 1. Even you can increment it by 2. You can increment it by 3. If you put 2 here, then every time you execute this statement, 2 will be added with the previous value. So 0 plus 2 will be 2, 2 plus 2 will be 4, then 4 plus 2 will be 6, then 8, and then 10. So it means that this statement will be executed 5 times if you increment the value by 2. So same is the case with the for loop. This is the initial value, this is the final value, and this is the step. In this case, it is 1. So this is important. The range has 3 things: starting value, final value, and the step. It could be anything, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, even minus. It could be anything, the last value, 5, 10, 100, 1000, million, billion. It could be anything. The step again could be anything, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the scenario. One more thing, important thing, this thing is optional, and this last number is also optional. If you do not specify the initial value, by default the value is going to be 0. If you do not specify this thing, by default the value is going to be 1. So that is up to you. You can omit these two values, but this thing is important, the final value. If you do not specify, the loop is going to be an infinite loop. So you have to mention how much time you want to execute a statement or group of statements. So let us give it a dry run. Initial value of I is 0. Check condition. 0 is less than 10. Yes, condition is true. Then print I. What is the value of I? 0. So 0 will be printed. Again, we have a loop. Go back. Increment the value of I by 1. So the previous value was 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. Check the condition. 1 is less than 10. Yes. Print it again. Print the value of I. So the value of I is now 1. 1 will be displayed. Go back. Increment the value of I by 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Check the condition. 2 is less than 10. Yes, condition is true. Print I. So 2 will be printed, and so on. This loop will be executed for the value of I until the value of I reaches 10. Once the value reaches to 10, 10 is less than 10, no, condition will become false. The value of I will not be executed, and then we will come to the next statement, that is done. So done will be displayed on the screen only once. Okay, last thing to remember is that 10 will not be displayed. 10 is not included. If you want to display 10 as well, then you have to write 11 here. So it is actually like less than, always less than, not equal. Example number 2. This is the same program as the previous one. The only difference is the step value. Now I want to display the value of I every time. So the first value which will be displayed is 0. Then 0 plus 2. Now the step value is 2. 0 plus 2 is 2. Then 2 will be displayed. 2 plus 2 is 4. Then 4 will be displayed. Then 6 will be displayed. Then 8 will be displayed. 10 will be displayed? No, it will not be displayed because 10 is less than 10. No, condition is false, then 10 will not be displayed. So it will display 0, 2, 4, 6 and 8, and then done statement will be displayed. Another example about the for loop. This is a program which I will discuss in the practical session, but let us give it an overview. I want to find the sum of all even number, and I want to find the sum of all odd number up to a number specified by a user. So number is a variable. Let's suppose the user has provided 10. So 10 will be stored in number. I want to find the sum of all even number from 0 to 10. And I want to I want to find the sum of all odd numbers from 0 to 10. Equal to 0 means that initially the value of even is 0, initially the value of odd variable is 0. Mean to protect from saving the garbage value, we have assigned them value 0. If you do not assign them, initial value doesn't matter. And then the for loop, initial value is 1 and the final value is number. So the loop will go from 1 till the number specified by the user, which in this case is 10. You can also start from 0. Okay, as you know, a number is even if it is equally divided by 2. This is the remainder operator. If you divide any number by 2 and the remainder is 0, it means it is an even number. Otherwise, it is an odd number. So if it is an even number, you have to add it to the even. If it is an odd number, you have to add it to the odd. And for that, we need an if statement. So divide the number I. So initial value of I is 1. Take 1, divide it by 2. Remainder is 0? No, which means 1 is not an even number. So it will be added to the value of odd. Take another value for I. This time the value of I is 2. 2 divided by 2, remainder is 0. Yes, that is true. So it means 2 is an even number and it will be added to the even variable. Last thing I would like to mention that look at here. This is the starting value. This is the final value. But I do not mention the step, the third value. So what will happen? It will take the default value, that is 1. And another thing, in the previous example, I provided a number here, which is a constant. Here I am providing a variable, which is not a constant, but the value of the variable is constant. So here the number is 10. It will be replaced by the 10. And then finally we have to print, hey, tell me what is the sum of the first 10 even, not 10, but up to 10 even number. So it is displayed here, and then same case with the odd number. So we will discuss this program again in the practical session. And our next program is like this. We want to display the following output. Sometimes the students are asked in the paper to solve questions like this. The output is given and they are asked to provide it, to write a program, to write a code for it. So we will write code for it in the practical session as well. We will discuss it in the practical session. And the final words is about loop variables. Okay, if you remember, I told you some general guidelines about the loop variable. They must be meaningful, they must be descriptive, they must be long enough. But you can see that normally for loops, we use variable like I, like J, like K, like A, B, C, like X, Y, Z. So they are against the rule, doesn't they? Yes, they have. Normally we use descriptive name, but for variable, we prefer to use short names, one character name. And normally we use I, J, K, X, Y, Z or A, B, C for the variable that we use inside the loop. Why is that? Why we do not use descriptive name here? You can use them. There is no restriction. But the recommendation is that you have to use the short name. And what is the reason for that? Actually, the concept has arrived from the Fortran language. The language in the 50s, 60s, that was very much common. In the Fortran programming language, the loop variables had to be called I and J. So the same concept we are using in other programming languages. So in other programming languages, the common convention to use for variable name that are used inside the loop is to use I, J, K, A, B, C or X, Y, Z, and the concept has been taken from the Fortran programming language. Thank you so much for watching the lecture. Please stay tuned for the practical session related with the week number 7. See you there. Till then, goodbye.